Hello, malt mates. Welcome to the Bothy. Welcome to review number 1117 in the Whiskey Bothy. Just a knackered old building. It's really old and very unfashionable these days because it's made from stone, solid walls, with sand literally dug off the local beach probably about 250 years ago. It's that kind of building. But do you know what? It's lasting. And this building will still be standing when many new builds, including skyscrapers, including important prize-winning buildings, have been long since demolished. The thing about old buildings is they're strong, robust, simple, and they keep standing even after they're supposed to have fallen. And both you and I, as old building whiskey drinkers, want to be in the same situation. We want to look after our health. We've been drinking whiskey, perhaps a month, perhaps a year, perhaps 10 years. I wouldn't say anybody's been drinking for 100 years, but hey, you never know. Fact is stranger than fiction these days, is it not? And so I'm going to talk about the alcoholic. Oh dear. Oh, controversial. Will I be complained about? Will there be an effort to defund me on the platform? Only time will tell. However, we do need to have this conversation because the idea of the alcoholic of yesteryear, right? So if you're a pensioner reaching pension age, I'm not there yet. In fact, I feel so young and fresh because we're in Britain and the pension age is pushing further and further down the years. Because that's what's happening. Anyway, moving back to my commentary. I can remember as a child leaning out my bedroom window at night and watching the alcoholics crawl, at times literally in hands and knees, crawl up the little hill that I lived on. Because the pub was down at the bottom of the hill. In fact, there were several pubs. And the oldest pub had steps outside of it. And I'm going to tell you this story. It's a great story. And basically it was an 18th century pub called an Arms, right? All pubs tend to be called the Arms. And it had a stone flight of steps, 5 steps high, that led up to this little platform. And it was literally outside the door of the pub. And basically it was for people who went to the pub and got pished. And then they'd go out and they'd unfettle their horses. Sorry, not wrong words, not fettling. They would unstrap the horses that they had tied to a metal railing, and then they'd walk the horse to the steps, and then they'd walk up the steps so they were the same height to get on the horse, because there's no way they could have got up, foot in the stirrup, up and over the horse without falling off, and even worse, falling off and breaking their neck. So it was a convenience platform for drunkards who were riding home on their ponies and horses. Now, that's history for you. Of course, it's a little bit more convenient these days because in more recent times, people would come out, they'd walk round the corner, away from the site of the pub, under a lamppost, jump into their car, and I'm talking about the 1970s, and then they'd drive home. And most of the time they'd make it, but sometimes they'd end up in a ditch. But when the local policeman was in attendance, they'd just give them the special handshake, and then they'd basically be given a lift home by the police and told not to worry about it. It all depended on your status and your social credit in those days. And that's just the fact of it. I'm just telling history as it really is, because I was there to see it. I can remember coming out my front gate one morning, and the Ford was a blue Ford Cortina, and I think it was a 2.5 litre container, a very powerful car, had been driven into a letterbox. And I must say the letterbox stood up to the impact really well. But there again, it was 1920s cast iron in a very strong foundation. And the car had definitely come off worse. And the occupant of the car had staggered home, broken ribs and all, just walked about 1.5 miles home, got up the following morning, reported his car stolen, as one does. And then, of course, it was found embedded into a letterbox somewhere else halfway up a hill. Then by the 1980s, the golden age of cocaine, when cocaine was pure, when it was very affordable, when it was real, when it was properly made. That was rave culture, beginning of rave culture. Rave culture was really 1990s. It was the new romantics, it was post-punk, that's what it was. And of course, this was the age of people getting past the Bloody Marys and the baby shams, and the sherry had finally gone completely out of fashion, and alcoholics were drinking in public, and it was tolerated. But there was more of a support mechanism in place to get them home without harming themselves and, importantly, harming other people in the process. But it was still tolerated. But that was then, and this is now. And there is absolutely, and you can see it wherever you look, there's an anti-alcoholic culture. And there should be. Alcoholism and alcohol abuse are hugely destructive. And it's not like the old days where the alcoholic could be out in public laughing, dancing and making a fool of themselves. Because the times they have changed, malt mates. And we're now in the age of instant social media, of Instabling and TikTokology, where someone will be out shouting their mouth in public because they're intoxicated with alcohol, and literally by the time they turn up at their office or their place of work at Monday morning, their boss is standing there, steely-eyed, arms folded, with their official notice that they're suspended on full pay pending investigation for inflammatory antisocial comments on social media, which brings their employer into disrepute. They're then sacked. Because the evidence is instant. The evidence is absolute. So alcoholics now are being smart. They're spending more time in home and spending more time in the privacy of their own premises with their internal cameras covered if they're being smart, and their mobile devices put into a bag out in the front steps so they can be eavesdropped in when they're making comments under the effects of intoxication. The thing about intoxication is it's a habit that creeps up on you. It's been happening, it's tried, circumstances on several times tried to make an alcoholic of me, but I just didn't have the stamina for it. I found that as I was becoming aware of it, I just went off alcohol completely. I took a total respite of several months. Back in the early days, particularly when I was a student, I had this thing for a bottle of red wine every night. Now, as soon as it had become a bottle of vodka, I would be in serious trouble. That really goes for your health. It's hard liquor. It's where the real damage occurs. It's not just your liver, it's your kidneys. It's everything. We tend to regard our internal organs as things we have to look after in isolation. One supplement for this liver, and one supplement for that heart, and one supplement for your spleen, and another supplement for your kidneys. No, we need to view the body holistically. We need to have dry periods. We need to be prepared to not touch alcohol for a month. I know you're not going to hear this in any other channel, malt mates. Not one that comments about whiskey. But we need to have this discussion. We need to be prepared when we spot our friends, our whiskey mates, at whiskey festivals, at whiskey clubs, when they really are drinking too much. We need to basically meet up with them, just for a cup of tea and a biscuit and say, mate, I took a record of what you were drinking at the whisky club. You drank a half a bottle of high-strength whisky. And see, the whisky festival, you drank a whole bottle, 70 centilitres, of cask-strength whisky. To which your pal will say, how do you know I did that? Were you measuring? Were you counting? And the which the reply is, no, I just discovered I couldn't keep up with you. You were too far ahead of me. There's an alcoholic in each and every one of us. We have to be mindful. It's a new scene now. We can cover the symptoms of alcoholism with civility, enthusiasm, passion for our whisky project, whisky conversations. And it's so easy in the privacy of our own home when we have our virtual community online to pour a glass at 8 o'clock in the evening, and by 2 o'clock the following morning we're looking at the bottle that's sitting in the table in front of us, and we're kind of slightly puzzled because that bottle started full and now it's empty. And we have to be honest and realistic, and we have to be compassionate towards ourselves. There's not one of us who isn't at risk from this situation. But where we find amongst our own friends and community that there are people struggling with an addiction which is always there in the background, which doesn't necessarily affect all of us all of the time, or most of us for most of the time, we still have to be there to support, advise, and even give reality checks to those beside us and around us who need our guidance and the cold comfort of a companion who actually cares. People don't want to be read out the facts, the riot act about overconsumption, but it does need to be a conversation. And this is why virtually every year on my channel I will dedicate an extras to this subject, updating it as best I can, because it should never be too far from our minds. It's very easy now, in the silence of our golden solitudes and moments at home, on our own with some good friends, that we drink too much, too often, and we're enjoying it too much. And the best way to guard against it is to take time out, limit ourselves to what we consume, condition ourselves to having dry weeks and dry months even. The whisky industry might not be particularly pleased about it, but the fact is, if you're not an alcoholic, you're going to live longer, and if you live longer consuming responsibly, you're going to be buying more in the long term. It's not rocket science. I commend this message. I hope you support this message. I hope you appreciate what I'm doing here, because it really needs to be done, even though it's not fashionable, even although it's going to risk complaints. But there we have it. That's life. Let's get on with it, malt mates, and let's make every malt moment matter. Clicker time.